Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the Backstory Podcast today. As we've mentioned many times, some of the fun things we're bringing you is we want to bring you some people that are very real, not necessarily extremely famous people or people that have been doing this for eons of time. But what I'm really interested in doing is bringing you people that you can see yourself in, and people that have done this, and people that have been working many times even behind the scenes for some time. I'm very honored to bring you Kyle Davies today. Kyle is a magical person. We met back in 2005, I think, originally, and he has gone on to create his own level of work. He's written a book called The Intelligent Body. This is back a little ways, but the work in here is absolutely incredible. It's talking about working with chronic fatigue, different pain levels, and really some fascinating parts about how he works with the physical body himself. He's a psychologist who's turned into just an incredible healer, and I'm very honored today to bring you Kyle. Kyle Davies, how you doing, buddy?
Great to see you, Steve, and thank you so much for having me on the show today. And hello, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. And I forgot to tell you, he's in Cardiff, Wales. So he's on the other side of the pond right now. I'm in the morning, he's in the evening. So, yeah, I just flew home recently on my birthday, and it was the longest birthday I've ever had because it was 33 hours long with the time difference. So anyway.
That's a long flight.
Yeah, crazy stuff. Anyway, welcome today. I wanted to kind of connect with you because you and I have been talking about doing some work together. And that is coming. We're going to be doing some sessions on healing together. I just love your approach. The group has given me lots of ideas and different things that we try to plant seeds, but I don't actually get to do the work the way you do. And I'm thrilled to be able to bring this to people and kind of share a little bit about it. Tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing right now.
So let me give you just a little bit of history and how I got to what I'm doing now.
Oh, please.
I'm a psychologist by trade. I started up my career working in organizations back kind of whenever it was like 30 years now. When we work with people in organizations, you were working with somebody in their role. And I was fascinated to get a little bit deep with people. So I went and trained in therapy, a variety of modalities, and started a little therapy practice. Then in the early 2000s, I started working with a medical doctor, and we focused on chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, and those kinds of health challenges. And we were coming from my body perspective, and this is the early 2000s. And back then, nobody was interested in a mind-body perspective. It was
right.
Even when people said, oh yeah, I believe in the mind-body connection, when you talked about physical symptoms and the connection with emotional stress or stress in the body and brain, they'd say, how can you talk about physical symptoms and relate that to stress? That's, they're different things, aren't they? So we've seen a huge change in that. Obviously, there's been massive interest in the last kind of 5 years or so in my body work. So for a period of time, I worked exclusively with people with chronic fatigue and chronic pain challenges. Now I work with a very broad range of people. So what we've seen, I think, since COVID, because we're in the midst of this spiritual awakening, is there's a lot of people that come to me that they're lost. They're discombobulated. They don't know who they are. And of course, this will manifest as anxiety, depression, burnout, as well as the kind of fatigue and pain stuff. So I still work with organizations, and I think organizations need these sorts of things more than ever as they're shifting towards kind of smarter ways of working, really. The word resilience has become huge within companies now because stress issues and mental health challenges are going through the roof. So, I do that organizational work and then working with individuals. And the core of it really, Steve, is very much like, I guess, the essence of what you do. And, obviously you've been a huge influence over me and what I've done over the last 20 years now. It's that empowerment route. And it's bringing people back to help them find their true self. So I think that, at the simple baseline level, that's my sense of it. We're designed to flourish. We're designed to thrive. And when we can look inward and become empowered and see the creators we are, we can begin to flow. It's that idea that we don't quite realize the obstacles we put in our own way. So it's taking people through this journey of seeing themselves as victims of circumstance. Life is happening to me, through to, well, life presents me with an opportunity, through to, I am part of that flow of life and I can influence that flow. And become one with it. So, yeah, I guess for the most part, certainly on the one-to-one work, I am appealing more to those with either chronic fatigue or chronic pain problems, anxiety, and depression. But I get all sorts of people that come. As I say, lots of people these days feel very lost, stuck, overwhelmed, and looking for something. And for me, obviously, there are opportunities in all of those things, chances for us to see ourselves in the world in a new way, and grow. And of course, again, I suspect, like how you see it, is the more people that we can get aligned and flowing, the more we collectively
There you go. Yep.
your consciousness.
Yeah, that's exactly what the group is saying. They're saying, if you really want to live in an empowered society, the way you do that is to empower the people around you. And basically take your own power, step into it and do it. You've been doing some incredible things. And if you don't mind me saying, I believe you started with David Mickle, didn't you, Dr. David?
I did. He was a big influence, certainly on that chronic fatigue work. He had some great ideas, and I worked with him for a number of years. So yeah, and I think it was amazing, the early ideas that he had, because it was making those connections between emotional stress and physical symptoms. And I think outside of the spiritual community, not many people were talking about that. And particularly when you got into kind of mainstream health, nobody was saying anything about that.
That's correct.
So, and of course, everyone's talking about trauma now. So it's interesting how things have changed. We've got the vagus nerve, polyvagal theory.
Yep.
When it was on everybody's lips.
When it works, it works into mainstream is basically what happens. They figure out, I guess it's working. I think we're going to start using this. It's absolutely amazing. Yeah, it used to be very interesting. We were talking about the vagus nerve a long time ago, and then Stephen Porges, of course, came out with the polyvagal theory, and it's everywhere now. I mean, it's almost all psychologists and psychiatrists are talking about it and using it in different ways. It's a fascinating piece, but it's really, and of course, we don't actually deal so much with the vagal nerve as we do exercises and so forth with the vagal nerve, but that's our empathy nerve. That's who we deal with anyway. We have empaths that come to our seminars and follow us in different ways, and they've been struggling. They've been having this planet's getting difficult some in different places right now. So they really need to know how to use that in some ways.
But it's easy to get lost, isn't it?
Yeah.
I guess one of the core principles of the way I see things is that, I believe that we have the resources within us. I believe that even though we're being it's almost like we're on a ship in a storm and we're being thrown all over the place. But I still believe we have the resources within us. And there is a lot of talk about the vagus nerve and vagal tone and the exercises that I need to do. But I think it starts with looking inward. It starts with being empowered. If I engage with family and friends, if I go for a walk in the park, if I go to the gym, all of these things are supporting good vagal tone. It's not that I need necessarily to look at a crib sheet of techniques to do. And I think, this is kind of a big thing for me, because there's so many people, I think, are looking outside of themselves for, what are the 5 steps to get fit or to lose weight or to get smart or increase my vagal tone. And yeah, there are things that we can do, from toning, gargling and cold water immersion. And there's a whole variety of things we can do. But I think having that empowered perspective as a first step of it is within me. And it's not that I necessarily need to do anything, because people often come to me and say, should I be doing yoga? Should I be meditating?
Right.
And I say, well, if you feel drawn to that, then do that. But don't do it because your head is saying, oh, listen, I've read this, so this is what I should do. We want to get into that space where we're feeling first, and we're tapping into that knowing, that intuitive true self that's going to guide us towards the things that we need to do. And I think that's where confidence comes from, is that whenever we can align with that true self and be guided in that space, even though it's tricky, we begin to flirt.
Yeah, I tell you a secret. I don't say this very often, but I have never been able to hold a meditation for more than a few minutes. It's just not it's never been my deal. And yet we know that meditation, prayer, spirituality in general is part of what, as they say, tones the vagus nerve and the vagal theory. But you know what? I'll share this with you because I'm in airports a lot. My fiance lives in Belgium. I'm back and forth all the time right now. And the fascinating part about it is I exercise this in airports. I focus on sending out an energy in front of me to basically a beautiful energy. And I have to remember to keep that smile on my face because that's what does it. And I have the most amazing stories. People come up to me. I wear a hat most of the time. They come up to me and always say, hey, I like your hat, or something. And that starts a conversation. And then a few minutes later, we're sitting next to each other on the plane or something. It's just amazing how some of this stuff works. And I believe that's all done through our spirituality and aligning the physical body in many different ways. And so tell me about, go ahead.
If I can just say on that point, that's a really
Sure.
interesting, because I remember there's a big thing in spirituality. It seemed to be years ago, of the need to protect oneself.
Oh, yeah.
There was something about that felt disempowering to me. And I had this idea, almost like what you're saying, was, well, can't I get in touch with my true self, feel a sense of love and compassion initially for self, and then radiate that out? And I remember being at a talk, at a workshop hosted by somebody else, and saying about that I wasn't really a massive fan of, I need to protect myself from all of these energies out there. I said, how about you radiate rather than protect? And then this lady said, well, actually, I run protection workshops. Okay. But yeah, I think that's it. It's a great thing, isn't it? It's a great thing to do. It's a great practice people can have as you're walking down the street, is have that sense of, I'm in a high vibrational state and I can radiate that out and just see what happens.
Yeah. And I get on such a high from that. I mean, after that, I can't go to sleep. I'm buzzing so much that it's amazing because it allows me to really connect to my own spirit and to the world around me. When I'm going through the airport, most people in the airport are focused on where they're going. They're looking at a time schedule. They're trying to figure out what gate they're at, and they're not smiling. I try to go through with this big smile on my face. Even if I have to fake it in the beginning, it turns into be something really special later. So that's one of my practices. That's kind of how I meditate these days. So that's an interesting way to put it.
Good one. And it's connecting, isn't it?
Yes.
And I think that
that's it.
People are so disconnected that I think those little moments of connection and empowerment is great.
So tell me about stress. You're an expert at dealing with people with stress. Just tell me some of your views on that.
I think stress is a really interesting thing. People generally have this idea that stress is that overwhelming feeling that they have. For me, there's interesting bits about stress. There's stress we feel and stress we don't feel, and stress. It's the stress we don't feel that is a problem. Whether our stress is physical, environmental, mental, or emotional, the stress response is largely the same in the body and brain. So what that means is it's more than that agitated feeling that we have. So it could be, there is a stressor on the body of traveling and getting on planes and time zones. If you have a bad diet, if you don't exercise, if you exercise too much, if you have a case of flu, if you're having arguments with your neighbor, all of these things are, I would say, are stresses. And when it comes to our health and our well-being, it's useful to look at it from a perspective that there's a cumulative load. I think one of the things we have with a medicalized mindset, we always look for a single kind of reason or cause for something. I've got this health challenge. What is it? I think what we're discovering these days is that there are probably multiple primary causes which relate to our lifestyle, and they're related to kind of stresses. So the way I like to see it is that almost like there are lots of micro stresses that build up in our sort of stress buckets.
Well, that's a great way to look at that. Little pieces that kind of build up, kind of like the microbes in our gut. Sometimes they all, it's kind of like a democracy. Once you have one too many on one side, you go a direction. That's fascinating.
Well, I think it's certainly useful when it comes to having that understanding, because I'll often get people with symptoms, and they'll say, it's funny, I wasn't feeling particularly stressed when my symptoms were at their worst. And I'll say, well, probably what's happening is that's invisible stress. You're not consciously aware of that. And, part of the principles of this work are symptoms are messengers. So symptoms are the body trying to tell us something. And in many instances, with symptoms of fatigue, pain, stomach or bowel things, anxiety, depression, it is that we are blocked. Our emotions are blocked. Our true self is blocked. And it can be in the moment. So if I'm experiencing symptoms at 2:30 p.m. in Starbucks on a Thursday afternoon, I'm unconsciously blocking, but I'm blocking something at that point. I'm being aware of that, beginning to look at it with fresh eyes is useful. So those are the things I think about stress for me. Is there's stress can be good and bad. It's not all.
Yeah, no. Physical exercise is good stress. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. Unless you do too much.
Cold shower, a sauna. You always used to love your saunas. Do you still love the sauna?
Yes, I do have a sauna. And my friends still make fun of me because I have a sauna in the desert. That's correct.
But it's brilliant, isn't it?
I love it.
I'm a sauna fan too. But it's a stressor. So human beings are designed to be stressed, both emotionally, cognitively, physically. But of course, it's little bits of stress, isn't it? So it's knowing and understanding, well, there is good stress, there is bad stress, the stress we feel and the stress that we don't feel. And when it comes to health, it's understanding, okay, well, there's this cumulative load, and it's probably not necessarily one thing. And because that's where the whole thing of the vagus nerve comes in, because it's that load where it ramps up, and then vagus nerve is tipped into a kind of dysregulated or dysfunctional state, and that's when problems ensue.
That's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. How do you work with people? What do you see people? Do you have clients come to your office? Do you do work online? How do you generally work with people?
It's a mixture of both. So if people are local to me, they come in the office. Probably 70 or 80% of my work these days is done online because I work with people all over the globe.
Right.
And it's because I'm not hands-on. I'm not doing anything to people as such.
Right.
I'm guiding people through a process. There's an energetic exchange, but I guess it's educational. I'm facilitating a journey. I'm inviting people to shift the nature of their relationship with themselves and understand their own role as creators in their experience.
Awesome. Incredible stuff, my friend. And you've been doing this for quite a while. The other big question that we all have is, you've been doing this for a long time. Do you have to find that you have to kind of reinvent yourself, shift with the changing times? How does that work for you, Kyle?
I think it is always evolving, and I think because of the rapid rate of change globally,
Yes.
There is that sense of I need to keep up. I think one of the big shifts in the work that I've done in the last probably 10 years is that we always looked at things from a perspective of world happens, things happen, I have emotions, and I learn to suppress those emotions. Because effectively what happens is people learn from a young age, It's not safe for me to be in my body. It's not safe for me to feel, and it's not safe for me to be me. But there's a lot. There used to be a lot of external focus on that, and I guess one of the big shifts for me and the journey I take people on is, yes, we know that we're going to have internal experiences as a result of external events, but I guide people towards a space of beginning to see that, well, my experience, my emotional experience is created within me. It's not that outside life directly causes what I'm feeling in here. It's part of it is almost like the narratives that I'm running, almost like the contracts I have with life. My ego, to an extent, how do I know who I am? Well, I like this, I don't like this. So, but all of those things exist within me. And I think my sense of it is people go through life and they're trying to manage their internal experience. And they are trying to maneuver and manipulate and control life in order to control their feelings. You know, people only do the things that they do because they're trying to have a feeling experience. So
That's an interesting point. I like that. I'm going to use that. That's awesome. You're absolutely right.
when people can begin to see that, well, actually, my feeling experience is created within me. It's not that there's meaning out there in life. It's kind of like I'm imprinting meaning. I mean, the most simple example of this could be a game of any sport, football, anything, you know, and there's no meaning in that game. But if you're a die-hard fan and you're going every week, you're reading interviews with the players, you're listening on the radio, you'll have a big emotional experience about the outcome of games. But that emotional experience only exists within you. And it's about attention. We know attention is very powerful. The more attention I give to that game and that team and the sport, the more of an emotional experience I have. So I'm playing a role in the creation of my experience there through the attention I give something. Because for the most people believe that it's the events that's causing my feelings. So when people begin to see, well, actually, the experience, the feelings are created within me, and it's possible for me to have a different experience, even if circumstances don't change. That opens up to a world of possibility. Really, I'm no longer a victim of circumstance. You know, I'm maneuvering myself around this game board of life. So that's probably the big shift.
That allows you to really take responsibility for your creation abilities too. That's incredible. Yeah,
well, yeah, and it's a key piece, isn't it?
yeah,
And it's a tricky piece because, of course, we had law of attraction and being a mind-based identity, people thought, well, if I think about being in a red Ferrari, then it's going to turn up on the drive, you know, and then that didn't happen. So there's obviously, you know, there are complexities, nuances, and layers to all of that stuff. But having that, I think, been, you know, as a starting point of, well, you know, let me own the experience that I'm having, and let's be in that space of, well, if something's showing up for me, it's got to be serving me. I must love it at some level. What can I learn from it? I'm somehow creating this. And as you would have said, I've learned from you in the past that, well, yeah, there may be some bits as part of my soul contract, or there are things.
That's only direction. That's only direction. We're conscious creators. We're responsible for being here, and we're responsible for ourselves, and we need to take responsibility for that all the way around. But you're absolutely right. That's amazing. Yeah.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Is when we take that responsibility and know that, well, whatever is showing up, it's going to be serving me. And if I want a different experience, it's possible that I can do something that's different. Then it opens things wide for us.
Yeah. Incredible. Yeah. Basically, we had somebody recently ask a question of the group in a channel. It was an interesting thing that brings to your point that you're talking about. She said, you know, I'm really having a hard time living in the place that I'm living. It's very low vibration. Nobody really understands me. I'm planning on moving to such and such a place. What does the group think? Is this going to work for me? And they said, no, you're going to find exactly the same thing because you haven't changed. you're basically causing that reaction because of the way you're adapting things. And of course, that causes all sorts of stresses. We're trying to control the world around us many times to make ourselves happy and to feed our egos and to be able to work with that and see ourselves in different ways. But when it doesn't work that way, we end up with 10 times the amount of stress that we would normally have if we just take the next step. We just keep on walking in different ways. Magical.
And yeah, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? I think that individual, I would say, well, that's a great product of your culture because we're indoctrinated into that narrative that it's my circumstances that are creating my internal experience. And if I 100% believe that, I will be disempowered. I'll be in that victim consciousness and I won't be able to change anything. So being open to the idea that we have, it's that old cliche, isn't it? I'm taking me wherever I go.
That's it.
So I do need to kind of I need to look inside. And I think the looking inward that's the word, isn't it? The old Gandhi quote of be the change you want to see in the world.
Right. See the
you have to look inward first, which I think is particularly difficult in a world where we're invited to look outside of ourselves continually. It's all, these flashing lights going off. The internet is always on, social media. The fast pace of life. People are trying to keep up with things, so constantly looking outside of themselves and taking that time to look inward and knowing that, well, actually, it could be a lot simpler if I come in and believe that there's a wisdom, there's a true self within me, a soul, whatever you would want to call it, a flow of consciousness, that will guide me. I'll often say that as almost like a mantra to my clients is give over the heavy lifting to your true self. You don't have to figure it all out. In our mind-based culture, we want to know all the steps, don't we? It's like, I've got to know exactly what's going to happen when, I've got to figure it all out. And it's like, oh, no, you don't.
We get a lot of those questions. Yep, I know what you mean.
It's that trusted, that wisdom is going to be there to guide me. So I can do less. So yeah, that's, I suppose that's a big piece for me.
Yeah, it's difficult. The group keeps talking about the fact that we're all looking for our path. We're looking for our path of quickest evolution. We're looking for our path of least resistance. We're looking for all these easy paths or the path that's most effective. They say you don't actually make the path until your foot almost hits the ground. That's when you create it, and you can change it at any time you want if we just take that power and we change it inside. We don't change it outside. That's some magical work to work with. Fascinating.
Yeah, and there's an interesting point, and that is one thing I find, and you probably see this as well, is that people are really concerned about making a wrong decision.
Oh yeah.
So it's either making a wrong decision, or if I start going down that path, I've got to continue going down it. And so I say, probably as you would say, well, what if there's no right and wrong? What if you walk down path A or path B? You just have a different experience. And you always have the potential and the possibility and the choice to change and to go for path C or D or E. But you've got to be empowered enough to recognize, all right, if I feel a guidance to shift path, I can do that. And it's just an experience anyway, and my soul wants experience. So,
that's it. So sometimes we actually script, and when we talk about contracts that we made on the other side of the veil, sometimes we made contracts to step in the mud puddle, to run across a brick wall, to be able to experience some of these things many times because we've done it lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, and we've always said, why me? What am I doing wrong? Rather than just dealing with the issues and trying to grow from it. There's just incredible similarities there. And you're absolutely right about everything shifting so much. It was so strange when I started channeling 25 years ago, about 27 years ago. Channeling was on the edge. I mean, people looked at me and they say, oh, how do you protect yourself? And how do you know if they're the good guys and not the bad guys? And how do you you're going to do this? There was a lot of hesitation about that word channeling and everything else. Today, it's fairly commonplace. It's not only commonplace, but it's used I've done corporate seminars. I've done a lot of things to be able to give people a different view of themselves in different ways of that nature. And it's accepted because the reality is it's a different view. It's not perfectly right. It's not perfectly wrong. There is no right or wrong. We just got to deal with these things and work with them in different ways. That's what the group is really working with a lot now. They're trying to anchor us into what they call the fifth dimension. We've been anchored in the field of duality in the third dimension, and now we're moving out into a whole different way of looking at things. And many of the truths we've been talking about for a very long time, but now they're evolving, and it's really getting an exciting time. Exciting time to be here. I'm really glad you're doing the work.
It's interesting, that dualistic perspective, how that shows up for people is, I mean, so often, people will say to me, well, I can either do this or I can do that.
Right.
Or I either do it or I don't do it.
Or it's right or wrong, up and down, love and fear, all the opposites. It's kind of, and it worked for us in the lower vibrations of the third dimension, but today it's getting in our way. And the group has a really interesting way of talking about it. They say basically the first dimension was unity. It's what we call God. We were all together. We're all part of each other. We had to go through the second dimension to get to the third dimension. We picked up the imprints of duality. We picked up the ego. We picked up different things that we were going to need to live there. And now we're trying to go through the fourth dimension, get new imprints to live in the fifth dimension. And we have to release many of the things that we picked up in the second dimension. Kind of a challenge.
Well, it is, isn't it? It's disorientating because we're becoming something else. We're becoming something new. And of course, the ego wants to hold on to who I was.
That's it.
This is where the kind of ideas of being in the present, allowing your experience, removing judgment from your experience, practicing self-compassion, all those sorts of, phrases and words that we throw around are actually really hard to do, particularly, in the stormy waters that we're trying to work our way through. But yeah, it's interesting, certainly interesting times and, interesting shifts. But useful to look at it as exciting times.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
It is. We look around, we look at politics, we look at economies, we look at all the things that we think build our world and all the control of different things and so forth. And we feel helpless. We feel like we're not really in control. We're being manipulated. And yeah, of course we're being manipulated. Every time we turn on the television, every time we pick up the newspaper and see an ad, we're being manipulated. But that's just part of the game. And we don't have to buy into all that stuff. We can take our own power. We can look at these things and go, okay, there's another view. I'll take that in. But the reality is I'm responsible for me. And that's the hard part for a lot of people to really do. And we see the challenges. We've seen a lot of change. We've seen massive changes here in the United States and the UK, having to do with politics, crazy stuff going on globally. The reality is it really fits in some of the larger aspects. The group just recently reminded me of something we used to say all the time, that, in I think it's Hindi that it came from, the story of the Shakti and the Shiva. The Shakti has to come in and destroy everything so that the Shiva can rebuild it. We're in those times, and that can be very exciting and lots of opportunities and some wonderful opportunities for us to rid ourselves of some of these things and step forward in a whole new way. Absolutely.
But it's interesting, isn't it? I think with any evolutionary process, whether it's an individual, a building, roadworks, a culture, there is a period of chaos when you go from the old to the new, and we're in that period now.
Yep.
But yeah, one of the interesting things for me is in the times we're living is the importance of staying away from fear. When we had COVID, I went on the TV here in the UK and I was asked about it and people's responses. And I said, and this was right at the start where it really kicked off, that one thing that I wanted people to be aware of was how emotion spreads. And I said, I think that fear and the impact of that could be more damaging than the COVID virus itself, And that I think that kind of played out really. And I think it's one of the things that we can have in the world at the moment is that if we turn on the TV and watch the news and see all the things that are happening, we can quite easily get pulled into that, feel fear and begin to radiate fear. And that's what we don't want to be doing.
Yeah. We're conscious creators. If we feel it, we'll create it. It's real simple. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's tricky, isn't it? So it's, how do people deal with that? I think it all starts with the awareness of what's happening is that, well, I'm going to be energetically influenced by the things that I expose myself to. So maybe I won't watch the news as much. But be aware of that. That's the responsibility, I think, for us is that what's the energy that I'm carrying, because that's going to be influencing the way I see the world. Is going to be influencing what shows up in my life and the people around me as well. So I think that we all have a responsibility for ourselves and almost to each other, because we can collectively, and we can collectively raise the vibration by attuning to ourselves.
That's it. Little by little, we're responsible for our world around us and our own happiness. That's the hardest part about it. We always look for all the influences around us. I will be happy when. The reality is fear and unhappiness in general is only an attachment to some idea that you have about the future. It's a timeline trick. And even our astrophysicists are now starting to say things that the group said quite some time ago, that time is an illusion. It's a human construct that we had to create in order to see our world in this whole idea of being a spirit pretending to be a human. Absolutely fascinating stuff. Kyle,
I mean, that whole time thing, I always had questions about that. When my kids were small, they'd say things like, "Oh, Dad, do you remember when we did this last year?" And it was like, "We done it this morning." Or, "Dad, do you remember when we did this yesterday and we done it like last year?" And I thought, well, this is really interesting. Is it that their brains learn the notion, the construct of time? Because they're surrounded by it and they learn how to, kind of construct time. I don't know. It was just something that came. I just thought it was really interesting with kids. They kind of do this. Almost like they're lost.
The group has been talking a lot about the illusion of time. They've also said that that in fact that there are a lot of people that are here holding energy from 300 years in the future, that have come back in time, which opens up the idea. We've had all kinds of questions about time travel. How do you do that? What is that? They're not really talking about that as much as the fact that we're spirits. We're only have brief incarnations here that only last 80, 100 years, probably at the most. And we only have time to play this game in this way. And then we go home and we refresh and we're back to our natural selves in so many ways. That's really what the idea is. But they've also said that the time is circular, is actually spiral, pretty much like everything else in the world. They talk a lot about the toroid, the torus around our physical body, around the earth, the magnetic fields, all the other things and how that works. Got some fascinating aspects of things that are absolutely starting to and they're moving out of metaphysics into the physical world. And it's absolutely amazing to watch as some of these new things are being grasped and used in different ways. I'm very excited to be here. I think
it's those sorts of things show up, don't they? Because you just had a birthday. That's a birthday every year. But people often talk about this is happening to me again. On my journey, I've had plenty of experiences of, oh, I thought I was done with this. Yeah, I thought I'd mastered this, and I have that sense of, and it feels like a spiral of, well, what I'm experiencing is not quite the same as the way I experienced it last time, but I'm still having an experience again. So there's obviously more for me to learn. But that said, and I think it shows up in all of our lives, that spiral is kind of evident everywhere, isn't it? When we begin to look, so it's really interesting to know that it exists on that metaphysical level, as well as, on the micro level of our life.
It's fascinating. Kyle, we're going to have to do some work together. We've got so many different things in common. You've got another angle, a different view here that really fits into a lot of our work and brings new aspects from both of us. We're going to do some we're going to do some fun things together. I'm really looking forward to it here in this year. Once we got this website moved and some other things, we'll get to this very quickly. I really enjoyed our time together, sir. Is there anything you'd like to leave everybody with?
Well, that's a big question, isn't it? Well, that's a leave people with.
Sorry, I didn't give you any warning about that.
Really, it's the you are designed to thrive, and look inside, trust your wisdom, because it's always there. The way I like to think about this with clients is that it's almost like we've got clouds around our head. And we know when there's clouds, the blue sky is always there. We have a lot of clouds in this country, not so much in Vegas, but there's a lot in this country. Yeah. But we know the blue sky is always there.
That's right.
And so that our ability to thrive and to flourish and to feel okay, to have peace of mind is there. And it's not actually always about doing more. It's in many instances about doing less and trusting and looking inside and being empowered. So it's that thing of give over the heavy lifting of, if there's a lot going on in your life, give over the heavy lifting of figuring out all of the steps, to your true self, and trust that it's almost like you've got something there that's hugging you, it's looking after you, and it communicates with you through knowing, realizations, intuitive wisdom, and when you, at any moment, it's entirely possible for you to feel okay. Just come back into the present, breathe, anchor in, and you can begin to, almost like taking your hand off a ball that's being held underwater. It bounces to the surface.
So great.
We connect with ourselves. We begin to regain that peace of mind. So that was a long one message to the audience.
No, that's what I call channeling. That's exactly it. The group's always said everybody channels. They call it something different. They all focus it in little different ways, and it comes in different ways. So ignite your channel. Try to learn to trust it and use it. Absolutely magical. Kyle, thank you so much. Tell people how they can reach you.
Mainly through the website energyflowcoaching.com. Or if you're a business, it would be energyflowbusiness.com.
Oh, perfect. Kyle Davies, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. You're a wonderful healer, sir. We're honored to have you here with us. And like I said, we're going to do some work together. Absolutely. Thanks.
Thanks very much for having me.
Okay, we'll turn you back to the studio. Thanks for everybody for being with us. It's another one of the great days for a wonderful backstory podcast behind the scenes here at Espavo. Espavo, everybody, thank you for taking your power.